So, good morning again, everyone. This morning, I want to talk about suffering as a treasure. And, this is a kind of statement that sends people that aren't following this path sort of into the clouds because it seems so contradictory. But the quote from Rumi, the Sufi poet, is, quote, "Suffering is a treasure, for it conceals mercies. Suffering is a treasure, for it conceals mercies." And I really like that quote. And while it originates from the Sufi tradition, it really does resonate pretty deeply with the Buddhist teachings on suffering, transformation, and the path to greater freedom. From a from our perspective, suffering is not only an inevitable part of life, it is also a powerful teacher. Think about how it serves as a mirror, reflecting truths about our existence and guiding us toward great awakening, compassion, and more inner peace. So Rumi's notion of suffering as a treasure aligns with this perspective that suffering is not inherently negative. It is a reality, an inescapable reality of human existence, and within it lies the potential for growth, insight, and transformation. And believe me, as I said a few minutes ago, when I say that folks not on the path find this incomprehensible, yet it falls in line really clearly with the Buddhist teachings on suffering. The realization is crucial when we embrace this perspective because it shifts our relationship with suffering. It shifts our relationship with suffering. Instead of resisting it or despairing over it, we can approach it with curiosity and openness. We understand that within it is something valuable to teach us. Buddhism teaches us that suffering is a wake-up call. It's a red flag. It grabs our attention like a bad toothache. It forces us to confront the impermanent and interconnected nature of life. When we experience pain, whether physical, emotional, or existential, it often strips away the illusions and distractions that keep us from seeing reality as it is. And so in this sense, suffering is a kind of mercy because it disrupts our complacency and invites us to grow. Consider how the loss of a loved one can lead to profound realizations about the transient, temporary nature of life. It puts acceptance right on the front burner, right in our face. Because while the pain of loss is undeniable, it also presents an opportunity to cultivate gratitude for the time shared with the person we've lost and to deepen our understanding of impermanence. Similarly, when we face personal failures, personal hardships, we are often compelled to examine our attachments, examine our expectations, and the ways in which we cling to specific outcomes. These moments of introspection lead to greater self-awareness. They lead to greater resilience. So in practical terms, Rumi's concealed mercies, as he calls them, can be understood in the lessons and insights that arise from suffering when we allow it to be a teacher. And these include the development of patience, of compassion, of humility. I mean, think about it, enduring a period of illness might teach us patience about our bodies and gratitude for the times when we're healthy. It really shifts our perspective. Facing rejection or disappointment can cultivate humility and a recognition that our shared humility exists with all of us. In this way, as Rumi suggests, suffering becomes a treasure, not because it is inherently desirable, we don't necessarily like it, but because it holds the potential to deepen our understanding of the reality of life. Buddhist teachings emphasize the root cause of suffering as attachment and craving. We suffer because we cling to things we want to keep, even if they're impermanent, which they are, avoid the things we dislike, and resist the natural flow of life. And the problem is this craving creates this cycle of dissatisfaction because nothing in the world can provide lasting happiness or lasting security. Even the most joyful experiences are tinged with the knowledge that they are temporary, that they are fleeting. So to understand Rumi's perspective on suffering as a treasure, it's helpful to examine it more closely as it pertains specifically to attachment and clinging. When we experience suffering, it is most often because something we are attached to, a person, an idea, a desired outcome, has been threatened or is about to be taken away. And while, yes, this is a painful process, it also reminds us of the impermanence and the unreliability of the things we cling to. So in this way, suffering serves as a merciful reminder to let go of our attachments, to seek a more enduring source of peace. So for example, if I lose my job or give up my job or whatever, initially this loss might feel devastating because my sense of identity and security was tied to that role. I felt this powerfully 12 years ago when I retired. I didn't even realize how tied up my identity was in my professional role until it went away. I felt unmoored. I felt this loss of identity, which was tied up in my work and professional identity. But as we process these experiences, we come to see that our worth is not dependent on those identities, is not dependent on those external circumstances. We discover new opportunities or talents that we'd overlooked. We begin to develop a greater capacity for resilience and adaptability. And so in this way, here's the irony again, the suffering of losing a job can become a treasure. It leads to personal growth. It leads to a clearer understanding of what really matters. And what I found was, in my case, it really jump-started my Buddhist practice because I had more time, and it deepened my commitment to teaching the Dharma. I got involved in writing my book, something I'd never been on my radar. I got more involved in volunteer activities, which give me tremendous meaning in my life. My life is so much fuller now because it's not tied to a single professional identity with so much structure and keeping me in such a box. So let's be clear, though, about this. Buddhism does not advocate resignation to this suffering. It advocates an active engagement with it, a path to freedom through the cultivation of the wisdom and ethical conduct and mental discipline. But we have to actively take advantage of it. The Buddha's teachings provide practical tools, as we know, for transforming suffering into a source of strength and insight. Of course, the primary tool there is mindfulness, being fully present with our experience of suffering as it arises, without judgment or resistance. Mindfulness allows us to observe our suffering with clarity and compassion instead of reacting to it with avoidance or aversion. We create and hold space for our pain and explore its underlying causes. That's what I mean by welcoming it. And when we do that, because we're not resisting it, we're not entangled in it, it reduces the intensity of the suffering, helps us uncover and see the concealed mercies that Rumi talks about within it. For example, if we're struggling with feelings of anger or resentment, mindfulness helps us recognize the thoughts and emotions that are fueling that suffering. When we observe these mental patterns, we come to see that our anger is usually rooted in unmet expectations or a sense of injustice toward us, both of which involve clinging. And that awareness right there is an opening, an opportunity to respond more skillfully by addressing the situation with kindness or letting go of the need for control. This is how mindfulness transforms suffering into a path of growth and healing. And then we have compassion for ourselves and others. When we suffer, it's easy to fall into being consumed by our own pain, lose sight of the broader human experience. We think it only happens to me. But when we cultivate compassion for ourselves, we see that our suffering is part of the shared reality of all beings. And this not only alleviates a sense of isolation that often accompanies our suffering, but it inspires us to support others who are going through similar struggles. When someone who has experienced the pain of losing a loved one uses that experience to connect with and comfort others who are grieving. In doing so, the suffering becomes a source of empathy and connection. I see this all the time in my bereavement group. The way that the suffering of each of these individuals opens them to comfort the other members of the group. This is a treasure that enriches their lives and the lives of the other members. The Buddha emphasized the middle way, a path that avoids the extremes of self-indulgence on one hand, self-denial on the other, and this is particularly relevant when we talk about suffering. On the one hand, we accept the reality of suffering and approach it with equanimity, but on the other hand, we also take proactive steps to alleviate unnecessary suffering, cultivate the conditions for happiness and liberation. Act where we can reduce our suffering, but recognize we can't always do that. Finding a balance between accepting what we cannot change and working to change what we can. If you think about someone dealing with chronic pain, this practice they might need to practice acceptance by acknowledging their condition without judgment or resistance. But at the same time, wisely, they're going to seek medical treatment, adopt healthy habits, engage in practices like mindfulness to manage their pain more effectively. In this way, they honor the wisdom of the suffering while taking steps to reduce its impact on our lives. It doesn't mean we passively just tolerate suffering. If there are steps to be taken, we take them. So Rumi's assertion that suffering is a treasure, for it conceals mercies, really aligns beautifully, I think, with the Buddha's teachings on the transformative potential of suffering. From a Buddhist perspective, suffering is not a curse to be avoided at all costs, but a natural, inevitable part of life that holds the key to greater wisdom, compassion, and freedom. When we approach suffering with curiosity and an open heart, we uncover the hidden treasures within it and use those insights to grow spiritually and emotionally. And I know this sounds counterintuitive, but you know from experience that this really is the case. The teachings empower us to transform suffering into a path of awakening. We learn to face our pain with clarity and equanimity. We connect with others. We find meaning in our shared struggles. And through the middle way, we navigate this delicate balance between acceptance and effort. We embrace the lessons of suffering without being overwhelmed by it, without feeling victimized by it, without feeling picked on by the universe. In the end, suffering is not an obstacle to be feared, but a teacher to be respected. Like Rumi, the Buddha invites us to see suffering as a treasure, a profound opportunity to deepen our understanding of life and cultivate the qualities that lead to lasting peace and liberation. If we embrace this perspective, we can turn even the most painful experience into stepping stones on the path to greater freedom. So those are some thoughts this morning on suffering as a treasure.